All right, friends, I think we're going to go ahead and get started here. Well, Reverend Callie went that way. I thought he was coming this way. Let's get started. Let's have a quick word of prayer. God, thank you for this time. Thank you for this, your church. Help us to hear, help us to learn, help us to reflect. Bless our time, our continued time together. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, I'm going to turn the floor over to Reverend Callie. He's going to go over this General Conference legislative recap.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Edlin Cowley, and I'm the Metro District Superintendent here in the North Texas Conference of the United Methodist Church. And I had the blessing of serving as one of our members of our delegation here from the North Texas Conference that went to our General Conference, which is in 2024, but it is technically the postponed General Conference from 2020. And imagine that was a weird reference that we made fully throughout that week, but because of COVID and several things, General Conference was not able to be held in 2020, and they kept moving it from 21 to 22, and finally we just had it here in 24. And so we were in Charlotte, North Carolina, had that there. And so the form that you have is an overview of what actually happened at General Conference, and this was put out by United Methodist Communications. So you can read this in more detail. What I can tell you is there are three primary things that happened at General Conference that affect us here. One being that they were called the 3 R's. First one was regionalization. The United Methodist Church is a coalition of churches from across really the world. So we have membership from inside of the United States. The last time the numbers were kind of broken out, there were about 6 million United Methodists in the United States and 6 million United Methodists around different parts of the world, from the Philippines, Africa, Europe, altogether 12 million in the United Methodist Church. So when we have General Conference, we have representatives from all across the world that come for this meeting. There are 862 delegates representing the United Methodist churches and organizations that come together for this meeting. And so those 862 persons, we don't have a pope. There's not a lead bishop. We don't really have an executive officer as a United Methodist denomination. The General Conference is the organization that really speaks and makes decisions on behalf of the whole church. So we have really a representative government. We also have, just so you know the full picture, we have a college of bishops. So all of our bishops are together as a group. You might think of that kind of like our Senate. You might think of our judicial council as kind of like our church Supreme Court. And then we have a General Conference that really is a representative body. So you could think of like our House of Representatives. But preferably, that's where we might think that the parallels between the government and the church would end. But sometimes we have political things that happen in the church too. Hallelujah. God help us. Anyway. So there are three primary things. One being regionalization. So what is so unique about regionalization is when we gather for General Conference, a lot of times folks are coming from different parts of the world, but we are making decisions about what happens in the United States. And so a plan was put forward many years back for us to have more of a representative government, so that those who are coming from outside of the United States, when we come together for General Conference, we are not spending our whole time focusing on what's happening in the United States. So regionalization is a way of creating regions. So if you can think about the Philippines, you can think about Africa, you can think about Europe, you can think about the United States. Think about us being independent regions who, when we come together for these General Conference, it's more of an equitable body, so that it is not so focused on what is happening in the United States. For example, one of the major votes that happens whenever we are meeting for General Conference is all about the retirement structure and all of that for pastors in the United States. So folks from Africa, Philippines, Europe, all of that, they're voting on what our retirement policies are, all of those things. So it's very U.S.-centric. So regionalization is a way of creating the U.S. as a region. And so those things that need to be handled for the United States would be handled when the United States region would meet, rather than kind of the whole General Conference having to deal with just what's happening in the United States. There's a two-part process for that to happen. One, it needed to be approved by the delegates at General Conference. That happened. There's a second part. Second part now is that it has to be ratified. So that means that all of the annual conferences from all across the world now have to vote on regionalization. For regionalization to pass the second step, it has to be an aggregate, not of the annual conferences, but of the actual people who vote. So if the total vote is, let's just say that's 20,000 people, then it has to be a majority of that 20,000, not of the annual conferences themselves, but of the actual people that vote. And so it's going to take about 18 months for that to happen, because General Conference just ended a couple months back. We won't be voting as a conference until next year, when we consider regionalization in our annual conference. So it's going to take a bit, because the way that conference schedules happen, so we'll know if it was ratified by the individual voters in the individual annual conferences a little bit later. But what was significant that happened at General Conference is the first leg of it passed. So that's the first R, regionalization. The second R is revising our social principles. So I'm sure you've heard about the book of discipline that we have, yes? And maybe you've heard about the book of resolutions that we have, which are resolutions that we approve. So you can get a book of discipline and you can get a book of resolutions. When we talk about our social principles are not church law, but they are conclusions that guide us in our work. So revising the social principles means not making a change to church law, but it is a way of guiding us, those things, dealing with the principles that guide us. And so those, that and the discipline itself is up for ratification and change every time we meet as a general conference. What was very unique about this general conference, and what was very unique about the social principles being revised this time, was with the way that we define marriage. And so what was revised about marriage in this general conference was that we went from saying that marriage is between a man and a woman. We added, there was an additional statement that was added, that marriage is between a man and a woman, or marriage is between two adults, two consenting adults. And so we did not take away the traditional understanding of marriage. There was an additional understanding of marriage that was added to that. And so now it reads that marriage can be between a man and a woman, or between two consenting adults. And so that was the major change that happened to the social principles. The very last thing was that language that has been restrictive regarding our LGBTQ brothers, sisters, and siblings was removed. So for years, in the discipline, it read that homosexuality was incompatible with Christian teaching. However, homosexual persons are persons of sacred worth. And you can imagine, for our LGBTQ brothers and sisters and siblings, that language, speaking about them and their life choices, really was harmful to them. Additionally, persons who were LGBTQ could not be ordained as elders or deacons in the church. They could not go through the process. They could begin the process, but not fully go through the process of ministry. So that language came out of the discipline. The language was not originally in the discipline. It was added to the discipline 52 years ago. And that language came out of the discipline. So regionalization, first big R. revising the social principles. That was the second big R. And the third was removing this language, particularly addressing our LGBTQ plus siblings. That information was changed in the discipline. Those are the three big things that happened at General Conference. What I did when Dr. Faison invited me to come, because I didn't want you to only be guided by what I'm going to share with you, I want you to see what was officially put out. So you have this information that you can read now. You have it also so you can take it with you and study it. What I can tell you is, of the things that I've talked about when it comes to revising the social principles, all of these changes, let me just say a word, these didn't pass by like one vote or 3 votes. They were overwhelmingly passed by the delegates that were voting at General Conference this year. So the regionalization vote passed overwhelmingly. Revising the social principles, and what was neat was, now I can tell you in the beginning it was to completely take out the traditional understanding and to have it to be only between, the language would have gone to just like 2 consenting adults, but there was an amendment offered by a sister from Africa, and once she made that amendment so that we had both there, it passed overwhelmingly. And then the language that I'm talking about, referencing our LGBTQ plus siblings, that language, that coming out of the discipline, passed overwhelmingly. So I'm saying it because I want to represent that this is not, oh my goodness, and this passed by a hair. This passed overwhelmingly. And so I'm coming to you today not to defend what happened, not to celebrate what happened, but I'm here to answer questions that you might have, because you may not agree with what happened at General Conference. But that's one of the things that we celebrate about being United Methodist. One of the things I love when I joined the United Methodist Church, because I grew up in the CME church. My father was a CME pastor for over 40 years. But God led me. I met Zan Holmes when I was 15 years old, and when I moved to Dallas and my wife and I got married, we joined St. Luke. But one of the things Pastor Holmes used to say about the United Methodist Church, he said, I love the United Methodist Church because I don't have to check my brain at the door. We don't tell you what books to read or what movies to go watch or not watch. And so if you disagree, that's not a bad thing. Because there might, for years, someone might have been in disagreement with where we were before. But that does not mean, one of the things that John Wesley said is that we don't necessarily have to think alike, but we certainly are called to love alike. And so that's kind of the challenge, the yin and the yang that we live through as followers of Jesus who call ourselves people of the Methodist denomination and faith. So those are the 3 big things I really wanted to talk about that came out of General Conference. And what I want to share is that I wanted to be here to answer as many questions as I can. Life as a DS sometimes is kind of, you live on roller skates. So I was at St. Luke this morning, and my second stop on the skates is here, and I have to run over and be at Ridgewood Park, and I have to be there by 1:15. So I'm here, and I'm gonna be here for as long as I can, as close up to 1 o'clock as I can. But I want to answer as many questions as you have, and then I'm gonna leave you in the very capable hands of your pastor, Reverend Dr. Lucretia Faison, to answer more. So. This is sometimes the fun part and the scary part, because you can ask me anything you want, and I'm going to do my best to give you an answer. Yes, sir.
When is the next general conference, and when should we anticipate receiving the new discipline?
Yes, sir. The next general conference happens every 4 years. It's called a quadrennia. So the next general conference should be in 2028. The location for the next general conference hasn't been set yet, but it should be in June, somewhere between May and July in 2028. The new discipline, I think, will be out following it should be out January of 2025. Anyone else? Yes. Yeah, so that particular piece of legislation like passed on the last morning, and we did not have a lot of detail about it. So I can't give you a real detailed answer about that piece. But I can tell you it was, we ended on a Friday morning. That might have passed like Friday at 9:30, and we ended like at 11. So I'm sorry, but I can't share more about that. What I would say is take a look on this back, on the last page. Do you see it there? Okay. So, okay, and which bullet was that on the back page? Okay. Approved resolution calling it. Okay, so it's a resolution, which means it's not binding. At times, resolutions are passed so that the body can make its will and desire known. GCFA, General Commission on Finance Administration, they're the ones who, and WestPath, who handles clergy retirements and whatnot, they're the ones who kind of make those financial decisions. What I would say, if you want to get a more specific question there, that would be the best place to reach out to. But that resolution that passed at General Conference, for example, at annual conference, we have resolutions that we pass. This past annual conference there was actually a resolution on the Israel issue that passed at annual conference that we had at First Richardson here in the North Texas Conference. That resolution expressed the desire of the body to be on record to speak to the issue, but it doesn't necessarily mean that administrative decisions will be made in relation to the resolution. So it could mean that, but it may not mean that. To get an exact answer to that question, the best place to be would be to call the General Commission on Finance and Administration. But the fact that it references it as a resolution means that at the very least, the General Conference, the delegates of the General Conference wanted to be on record speaking on the issue. Yes. Yes, sir.
Thank you for bringing this up. All what happened actually causes impacting our conference because we're now
Right.
So
Right.
what was taking place over here?
Yeah, so another significant thing that happened at General Conference, you won't believe this number, but the budget for the general church, and when I say the general church, that's all of our agencies, General Commission on Finance Administration we just talked about, higher education ministry, discipleship, African University, all of that. The total budget of the United Methodist Church was reduced by 43%. 43% at General Conference. What that potentially means for us, because we're in a process of unification with the Central Texas Conference and the Northwest Texas Conference, that resolution was approved at our annual conference, actually at all three individual annual conferences. So we will have a unification conference that will happen September 27th and 28th in Abilene, and we will begin to do business as a new conference, the Horizon Texas Conference, January 1 of 2025. One of the things that will be presented, and I remember now this question that I got to talk with Brother Stewart about at annual conference, because the same delegates who were at annual conference in Richardson are the same delegates, representation from St. Paul United Methodist Church, that will be at the Unification Conference in Abilene. One of the things that will be presented at that Unification Conference is the budget. And the question is, if we had no change, that would have impacted our budget differently if we were going to do business going forward moving ahead as the North Texas Conference. The fact that we're moving forward and going ahead as the North Texas Conference only until the end of 2024, and we will start business as a new conference, the Horizon Texas Conference, in 2025. I'm aware of this conversation that are going on about our conference budget, but I'm not intimately involved in those conversations. But that's one of the things everyone's going to be looking at to say, wow, how is that going to impact our budget? Because another one of the things that happened with us, with our conferences being unified, is we had 3 different conference centers, 3 different sets of conference staff, which means 3 different communication directors, 3 different this, 3 different that. And so we've gone through a time of reducing staff. So right now, I think our staff, prior to the change, I think the number of staff was over 60. When the staff is complete, it's going to be under 30. So we're in the midst of some change and transition ourselves. So that's one of the biggest things that we're going to see, how, that no matter whether it shows impact with us or not, it's going to be different across the board. And that is impacted by this season of disaffiliation that we went through. Now, here in the North Texas Conference, we were not we had some very impactful votes and discussions from disaffiliation, but for example, the Texas Conference, coming out of disaffiliation, they had about half of their churches that chose to disaffiliate. Central Texas had, I believe it was right around 40% of their churches to disaffiliate. Northwest Texas, God bless them, about 80% of the churches disaffiliated. Here in North Texas, we had around, maybe 20. And here in the Metro District, we only had 4. 2 of them were Korean churches, Korean Central, Wesley Korean, Tyler Street, if you remember Tyler Street in Oak Cliff, and First in Irving. Those were the only 4 churches we had in our district to disaffiliate. So that season of disaffiliation impacted, and that's just me talking about these 3 conferences. We're talking about what that means across the whole world, but it's really unique to us here in the United States because there were different parts of the country, primarily Florida, Georgia, Alabama. They were much more impacted than us, but that disaffiliation did impact the denomination because that 43% reduction, it really has a correlation to the number of churches that disaffiliated and their impact with people and finances as they walked out the door. But I will tell you, what's exciting is that on the other side of that, it is what does ministry look like? Because you know what it's like, or I would imagine you can have an idea what it's like for the people who we have represented here. No one said, stay here. You're here because you want to be here. The room feels different when you know that everybody who's here wants to be here. And so for those who are here now, you're here because you want to be here. So annual conference had a completely different feeling this year than it did last year. And general conference had a completely different feeling than it has in the past because the people who are there want to be there. Yes?
So with the restructuring and bringing all the conferences together for the Methodists, what does this mean for our African American churches? And most of them are sitting here in the Metro District. So how does that impact us?
Yeah. So right now, for the next couple of years, right now, it doesn't begin to impact us at all. So there will be a time of redistricting. That won't be for another 3 or 4 years. So right now, I work with 70 churches and about 112 clergy, and right now, the district lines aren't changing at all. One of the things I'm really excited about is we're taking some of what we're doing with our Black Church Initiative, BCI, our group here in North Texas. So we're partnering with funding that Central Texas has. And so there's a new program, Christian Washington is leading this program. He's going to be working with all of our churches from the Central Texas Conference and all of our churches from the North Texas Conference. We've already had our first gathering. Your pastor was, there was a gathering at the parsonage where we had all of the pastors, all the lead pastors from our African American churches, and so you will see Christian Washington doing some of that work because St. Paul is one of the churches that he will be doing a little bit more concentrated work with. So you will get to meet Christian soon, and your pastor's going to, Dr. Faison will be able to share more information as we go into that. That's one of the things I'm most excited about because this whole spirit of us working together, this opportunity is good because it's allowing some of the vision that we've had in North Texas to match up with some of the money they've had in Central Texas, and we're going to be able to do something for African American churches in both conferences that we haven't done before. So that's one thing I'm excited about that's coming. Right now, I'm happy because we have, like I'm saying, we have all of our churches that are in the Metro District. We're not, no one's being taken out of the Metro District. Someone's coming in, someone's going out. We don't have that discussion for a bit. Yes, sir.
I'm a part of the unification team, and I think one of the things that's going to impact us is where annual conference is located.
Yes.
Because heretofore, it's been in the Metroplex, and it's my understanding going forward, it's going to be like Abilene,
Yes.
somewhere in the middle.
Right.
So in the past, we have not had any concern about budgeting for that. We will going forward.
That's right. Brother Stewart's bringing up an excellent word because so you can get an idea about what unification looks like. So imagine taking like the north part, not of just north, the whole of the state. So imagine going all the way up, going up to the Panhandle, coming back down and going over this way. So I mean, we're talking literally it's North Texas, but it is geographically further west because we're encompassing the whole area that used to be Northwest Texas, Central Texas, and us. So, I mean, if you really take the true of North Texas, that's what it is. That's what it will be. And so when we do have annual conference, that's one of the things we're going to have to look at, that we'll have to deal with, rather, because are we going to ask folks from Midland to come all the way to Dallas? Will we ask folks from Dallas to go all the way to Midland? The center point is the unification conference is going to happen in Abilene. Will our annual conference be in Abilene? You know, so we have those are things that are kind of still before us. Those are good questions that'll be asked at our unification conference, but that's going to be a part. What can be a part years to come? To your question, it'll be, you know, what will our districts look like when we ultimately get to that point? Where will we have one conference office? Because having one conference office for that big of a span, it's like, is that enough? Will we have like regional offices here? But those are questions that we don't have answers to quite yet. But very good point. Yes.
Diversity on our leadership. When the bishop rolled out his team, I don't see anybody that looks like me, that's doing, what are they doing for the diversity? Because we have this new space now, and you have more African Americans that make it available, is there someplace that they can go, maybe if the opportunities are available that we don't know about?
So right now, African Americans own the leadership for the Horizon Texas Conference. Reverend Derek Jacobs, who used to be the pastor at the Village, he's the director for leadership under the Center for Multiplication. I am on that team as African American, as district superintendent, and then Mary Nixon, who is a member at Hamilton Park, who is the incoming lay leader. She's African American female. One of the things that is monumental for me, and not just for me, for us in North Texas, Central Texas had its lay leader as a part of the appointive cabinet. Just checking my time here. As the appointive cabinet. What that means is when appointments were being made, who's going to this church, who's going to that church, it was different because we did not have our lay leader as a part of the appointive cabinet. Bishop Sines has now made it the decision that we will have our lay leader as a part of the appointive cabinet. So I'm on the appointive cabinet as a district superintendent. Mary Nixon, as our lay leader, is an African-American female, so we have African-American female voice at the table when appointments will be made. So for me, that's very significant. One of the positions that has yet to be filled is our director for diversity and inclusion. So I don't know who's. I'm not in the interview team doing those interviews, but I'm happy that we have not just the desire, but it is now a part of the conference structure for us to have a person that is a part of the cabinet staff that has as their job diversity. These are not catchwords in Texas anymore. Tried to take these away, but we have someone who's doing diversity, equity, and inclusion for the conference. So that would be my response. You have Derek, you have myself, we have Mary Nixon. And there's still positions that have not been filled yet, and perhaps those persons may be African American. We will see.
Our presence and our giving has had dropped significantly under our last bishop to going to African University.
Mm-hmm.
So are we now, I see that they mentioned the 200-year celebration, but I don't see that our giving, we used to be big in giving and the donations and the relationship.
Where did you see that it's gone down?
Um,
On this sheet?
Not on this sheet. Not
Okay.
on this sheet, but the prior, the last annual conference that we had, the contributions that we were making to African
Yeah.
University had dropped.
So I can't answer that. I don't know about that. Yeah, that I can't speak to. Other questions? Well, hey, Dr. Faison, anything you would like, any questions you have?
Legislation. We've had some off-and-on conversations in particular about what it means for us as a church. So this,
I guess, let me say this, let me share this. So, when it comes to LGBTQ, let me be even a little bit more clear on that. So, now the pathway is cleared for married LGBTQ plus persons to be commissioned and ordained in the North Texas Conference. And just so happened that we in the Metro District, we had a person who was in the process, and we got very creative in a way to work with this person so that she was able to interview after general conference, but before annual conference. She passed her interview, she was appointed, and on July 1st, she will begin her first appointment. So we in North Texas are, and I don't, I'm not sharing people's personal business and whatnot, but what I'm just saying is I'm happy to know that this person who has great abilities, great call, just a great minister, is able to serve and live out the call that she has. And so just excited and thankful about that. What I can also say is if pastors now have a choice. So what if I'm a pastor and I feel if someone asked me to do a wedding, can I do the wedding? In the past, the answer was no. Now the answer is if a pastor wants to do a wedding of a same-sex couple, they can. They can't be forced to. If a person does not feel comfortable doing that, the person will not be forced to do that wedding. But In the same way, if a person wants to do a wedding, that person will not be prevented. And the way that we were operating before, a person could not do that. Churches, a church has the decision as to whether you would, people don't get married in churches as much as they used to, but you as a church have that, you make that decision as a church. So the language is going to be that you can not be compelled or penalized, which means you get to make that decision whether you would like to host a wedding here or not. Your pastor, and not your pastor, all United Methodist clergy now have the ability to, if they choose to do a same-sex wedding, they can. If they don't want to do it, they don't have to. The spirit is much more of, in my experience of it, I would call it collaborative and permission giving, because it still gives the ultimate choice to an individual person to make that decision, but there's ability and freedom afforded that wasn't afforded before. And I wanted to be sure to share that so everyone could hear that too. All right. Yes, ma'am. Oh, okay, cool. Sweet.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Reverend Cowley, and your lovely wife, Jennifer. Thank you all for being here with us. Any other questions? And it's up to you all how long you want to hang, so. Yes, ma'am. I'm not sure that was being charged anyway. Are you talking about fidelity in marriage? That part. And that really has more to do, because there's no policing of that in churches, period. That probably has more to do with clergy in terms of that. And that would be held more at the district, that's when you get into the district superintendent and all of that, the bishop and cabinet. That would not be something necessarily the local church, unless there's an issue that it creates for the local church, then it becomes the business of the bishop and cabinet. As far, yeah, I don't know that, and I don't remember what the language is, so forgive me on that one. But that pretty much is not, I don't see that being, I don't see that being an issue in terms of the local church unless there's an issue with a clergy person, if that makes sense. Yeah, then that becomes, if that creates an issue, that's where the bishop and cabinet would get involved. It really wouldn't be, except unless the church is making that known to the bishop and cabinet, that's where that issue would be dealt with. Yeah. But I'm gonna try my best to behave, how about that? With the Lord's help, I shall behave. Amen, amen. Any other, and if you don't think of things you want to ask today, please, you can always ask any other time. As far as what we will do with a church, that's for conversation for our leadership team, and you can definitely provide input for that. That's, as the Reverend Cowley said, that's up for us to decide. Does that make sense? Okay. Anything else that I can answer right now? If not, may the Lord bless you and keep you, and enjoy your Sunday afternoon.